Okay, taking up with Reconstruction, we were looking at the rise of Andrew Johnson, and the last video I ran over a few seconds, just had to chop it off at the end. Sorry about that. So that was yesterday, this is today. It tends to work out that way most of the time. So here we go. Jackson, let me try that again. Andrew Johnson had a very high regard for Andrew Jackson, a previous generation had been president, and where Jackson had been a strong unionist and a strict interpreter of the Constitution, so was Johnson. So he did not agree with breaking up the Union, so he stayed in the Senate representing a state that claimed it wasn't a state anymore. That got him a lot of very favorable attention in the newspapers. Excuse me. In 1862, when federal troops had taken over much of the state of Tennessee, President Lincoln appointed Johnson to be the provisional governor of occupied Tennessee, and he did that job for a couple of years, creditably. Then came the summer of 1864. Things were getting close to a breaking point. Okay, the war had been going on for 3 years. Nobody expected that at all. When the first shots were fired, everybody thought 6 months tops. Now it's been 3 years. Casualty lists would look like phone books if they'd had those in those days, but you get the idea. War weariness had set in, was running very deep. The South was still winning most of the battles. Out in like Indiana, that area, there was a really noisy subset of Democrats called Copperheads, and they were clamoring for the government to just call it off, let them go, for Pete's sake. It's not worth it. And negotiated settlement with the Confederacy. Indiana was largely settled by Southerners to begin with. And President Lincoln has got to get reelected. What are the odds against that? At the moment, they look very, 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 very long. To start with, it had been 32 years since elected. The last one was Jackson all the way back in 1832. So it's been a long time. Plus, Lincoln had never been particularly popular, even in the North, and with the war stretching out interminably like this, he was the lightning rod. Beyond that, the deal, though, is if he doesn't get reelected, this whole thing's down the drain. Okay? All the blood, all the treasure. The South would go in peace or would win, and slavery would still be there for no telling how long. He got to win. So the Republicans did a couple of really unusual things. They changed the name of the party. For that one election, technically, they weren't the Republican Party, they were the Union Party. That would make it easier for pro-war Democrats to vote for a Republican. The Republican Party had only been in existence for 10 years, and there were already Democrats who, if they dreamed they voted for a Republican, they'd wake up screaming. So this would help with that. Another thing they did for the same purpose was to quietly dump President Lincoln's first-term vice president, a guy from Maine named Hannibal Hamlin, I believe, and replace him on the ticket with a pro-war Democrat, Andrew Johnson of Tennessee, who had never said he was anything but a Democrat. So off we go. Now, by the time the election, that's how it looked in the summer when they were doing that stuff. By election day, the wind had seriously changed. The Federal Army under Sherman, had captured Atlanta, and that was a big signal that the North was cruising toward a big victory, and the end was in sight. So it was clear by then that the war would be over. It'd be over soon. The North would win. The North would win big, and Lincoln was as popular as he ever got. And he cruised to a very easy re-election victory in 1864. Okay. So the choice of Johnson as vice president might have started to look a little bit unnecessary. It was unnecessary. They were sworn in on March 4th, 1865, and The way things worked in those days, since the vice president was a member of the legislative branch, that is, he was the president of the Senate, the vice president would take the oath of office in the Senate chamber and make a little speech. Then they walk out on the Capitol portico in front of the big crowd, and the president's sworn in. He makes his speech. Okay. And Johnson gets up, and he's like the Oscar winner that doesn't know when to sit down. And he's slurring his speech, and he's thinking everybody can think of. And it's way more than obvious that Andrew Johnson is so drunk he can barely even stand up. And Lincoln, we were told, was sitting over there with his elbow on the table, looking at it through his fingers, and what? He didn't say it, but he was thinking it. Lincoln was already having a dream, a recurring dream that was odd enough he told people about it, so that's how we know about it. In his dream, this really did happen. The dream did, not the event. Lincoln would dream that it was nighttime and he seemed to be alone in the White House. Didn't seem to be anybody there, and he's wandering from room to room. And then he hears sobbing, people just crying and sobbing. So he seeks out the source of a noise, open door into a lighted room, and an armed sentry standing at the door. So he goes over and he asks the sentry, who is dead in the White House? And the sentry says, Mr. President. So it says, the president, meaning Lincoln. There have been dramatized depictions where Lincoln goes in and peeks in the coffin and sees himself. I don't think that was part of the dream, but it proved to be prophetic because Lincoln was assassinated 5 days after what amounts to the end of the Civil War. That would be Robert E. Lee's surrender in Virginia. Okay. Andrew Johnson then became the President of the United States. Okay. Being president will calm most people down. He waits about a month or so, 5 weeks, before it was more than that, it was late May, before he unveils his plan of what to do with Reconstruction. He didn't like the word Reconstruction, so he called it Restoration. Until then, the radical element, these are relatively extreme Republicans who want to make use of the victory by imposing change on the social and economic systems of the South. Social, of course. They were fighting to get the 13th Amendment ratified. That's the one that abolished slavery. By the way, that amendment is the only time the word slavery ever appears in the Constitution, when it's abolishing it. Okay. Radicals thought Johnson was probably a man their way of thinking. During the election, he made some extremely inflammatory remarks, farther than even most of the radicals were willing to go. So they thought they had their man, but he disappointed them quite a bit. Johnson's plan of restoration was unveiled on May 29th, 1865. Now, Johnson believes in a very tight, strict interpretation of the Constitution. The way he read it, there are only 3 things that the president actually had the authority to do. He hadn't drunk the Kool-Aid too many of us have drunk today, thinking if something just seems to need doing, that must make it constitutional, which I'm afraid is not true. Only 3 things the president could do. So let me see if I can think of all 3 without looking at a piece of paper. Okay. You have to restore civilian authority in the South as fast as you can. Okay. What does that mean? That means that the only governments, national, state, or local, in the South were Confederate governments. And those have completely ceased to function. Most of the office holders are hiding out, afraid they're going to be prosecuted for treason. So the only closest thing to government is just a few places where there are federal troops exercising martial law, military law. Other than that, it's just free-for-all. So you've got to fix that. You have to establish civilian government in the South with state governments loyal to the Union. Okay, you got to do that. Another thing, the status of the people who participated in the rebellion has to be determined. Okay? Status of the rebels. Now, the Constitution only defines one crime, and that's treason. They defined it tightly so it wouldn't end up as a sort of catch-all for some out-of-control government just to put its enemies in jail. Treason only exists during a declared war, I believe, but it's making war on the United States or giving aid and comfort to its enemies. That's it. It takes the testimony of 2 witnesses to the same observable act to to get a conviction. There have only been about 24 treason prosecutions in the whole history of the United States. But you got a million Southerners who've done what treason is. What are you going to do, Mr. President? Extreme options. If you just sort of put it behind us, move on, pretend it didn't happen. That leaves the door wide open for somebody to try it again later. That's not a good idea. Or opposite extreme, try to hunt down and prosecute every single rebel. You're not going to be able to do that either. It's just impractical. They won't testify against each other. So, but something's got to be done to determine that. Even people who would be potentially prosecuted are going to want to know what the deal is so they can make their plans. Thirdly, and this may seem odd coming from a white Southerner, Johnson was determined that slavery must be stamped out forever. Johnson was not himself a slave owner. In fact, he'd spent his life in deep and bitter resentment of the wealthy silk-stocking guys who did own the slaves. And he wants to free the slaves, not because he's really an abolitionist in the normal sense, but because that will strike a blow against them from which they will not soon recover. This is class warfare. So that's it. So his plan of restoration dealt with all this stuff. Johnson cannot be accused of being an unintelligent man at all. To come from where he did, get as far as he did, it's really amazing. But to establish civilian governments and regularize the status of the rebels, it's all fairly simple. It didn't get carried out, but it's fairly simple. Johnson offered a complete presidential pardon to almost any ex-rebel who would qualify for it just by signing an oath of allegiance to the United States. That's all you had to do. Complete pardon. You would never have to lose another wink of sleep over whether somebody was going to come after you for what you did during the revolution, the rebellion. There were some that didn't automatically qualify. If you had held high office under the Confederacy, or if you had once taken an oath to support and defend the Constitution as either an office holder or a military person under the United States government, and then went back on that to support the rebellion, or if you just had more money than Andrew Johnson thought one man ought to have, you'd have to go to the president in person. And for the rest of that year, Johnson was pretty much being hounded by Southerners pleading for their existence. Most of them blew it off, but the ones who did turned his head. They buttered him up. They turned his head. He'd bawl them out. He never denied any applicant on that. That has established for you a pool of voters who are nominally loyal to the Union. Those people could, here we go again, Lincoln required it, now Johnson requires it, rewrite the state constitution and jump through the same hoops that Lincoln required, repudiate secession, repudiate the debt, and abolish slavery. There you go. You've established civilian government nominally loyal to the Union, you've regularized the status of the rebels, and you've abolished slavery. Now, the 13th Amendment was not yet ratified at the time. It was going to abolish slavery. All right, so there you go. Now, Congress was not in session and would not reconvene until December. So they weren't really particularly happy about this, especially the radicals. It doesn't do anything to protect any rights for the former slaves. None at all. Johnson doesn't care about them. He just cares about hurting their former owners. Let me see where I'm at here. So the radicals just have to stew until Congress reconvenes in December 1865. By that time, the southern states have all rushed through the process, and they sent their full congressional delegations to D.C. in December of 1865. And to the Northerners, it looked like these are unreconstructed rebels, just barely had time to change out of their Confederate uniforms, and now they show up to be members of Congress. Okay, you had about nearly a dozen generals and colonels. You had various office holders. You had about 50 members of the Republican Congress. You even had the Vice President of the Confederacy, Alexander H. Stephens, a little bitty, small guy from Georgia. They were physically chased out of the House and Senate chambers. Congress refused to accept them. So we'll take this up in the fourth video.